World Town Hall meeting. We're grateful for those that are in attendance today. Today is March 5th, 2024, and we'll be going over some of the advancements for this last week and then general things throughout the period, so to speak. This is a private membership for those that are members as well as those that want to join and get involved. Some of the things we may talk about may be the future or forward-looking statements. We're grateful for you having an open mind and understanding parts and pieces of really how a simple model can bring humanity together by using access devices, whether they're phones that an individual has encryption keys to, and their own data and their own identity and their own assets that leverage a decentralized storage to be able to, and decentralized storage meaning lots of different storage disks, but one file that gets broken into many. So some folks may say, you lost me there, but it's a simple model in all reality, but this model takes time to be able to get deployed and understood by many. The biggest advancements this last week is primarily based around what we call the Oceanic Coalition. And this is an organization that is primarily focused on decentralized countries, nations, kings, or people, in some cases tribes, that want to come together and actually use a system that will leapfrog over the colonial-based system that humanity has come to know so well over the years. For those that don't know Phil Lane Jr., we've worked with him for almost 20 years, personally meeting him here in Hawaii on the Big Island. Wonderful man, and you'll get to know more about what he's doing with uniting the eagle and the condor from the north to the south. We'll also talk about efforts from the east to the west, but the goal is to help you see different kingdoms, different nations, and different ecosystems. Maybe they're counties. For instance, in the next couple of it's going to be about 2 weeks or less, you're going to see many counties across the United States of America, as well as many provinces across Canada and Australia, stand up and do some unique things within their particular counties. You've already seen some of them happen within some parts of Arizona, and those are kind of a precursor as to holding the local authorities, or what they would call authorities, accountable for things that are happening. What you've already seen is within the Pacific. I'm going to see if I can jump to a map here real fast. You see in the Pacific a rollout of different types of ecosystems. Some of them are full-fledged countries. Some of them are developing countries. Some of them are countries that have just walked away from colonial occupation, whether that's around, France and Britain at the same time. For instance, in Vanuatu, they literally just took back their 83 islands and 81 languages and 3,500 years of living there. For those that don't understand what a piggy bank is, it actually comes from bases right there in Pentecost Island in Vanuatu. And money was actually exchanged with pig tusks back in the day. And there's actually a piggy bank, so to speak, that actually stores those pig tusks there. And when you really understand these different decentralized cultures and people and tongues and nations and the importance of them keeping their heritage and who they are and where they came from, and the stories of their forefathers, and particularly fathers turning to the hearts of their children and the children turning to the hearts of their fathers, the importance of family and that connection within cultures, you'll start to understand some of the work and the importance of it. Particularly when we talk about this first phase, we talk about Tuvalu. Tuvalu is Polynesian-based, primarily out of Samoa and Tonga, or the recent bloodlines that most recently go back. They continue to go back through Easter Island as well as Hawaii, all the way to the areas where Phil Lane will be working from the north to the south. But wonderful people. They just went through elections, and you'll see some systems and tools that we hope to work deeper with them over the coming time and years. You'll also see some technologies similar coming out of the Hawaiian Kingdom, which about 131 years ago was taken over. There is a difference between Hawaiians and Americans, and the goal is to be able to help that be understood, not just that it was taken over, but really how do we all live together in peace and harmony, but at the same time not forget the past and make right things from things that were wrong in the past. We talked a little bit about Vanuatu, but there's many other countries, nations, kindred, tongues, and people that you're seeing here within this map. But what you'll also start seeing is 740 different tribes throughout some of these ecosystems that may not be formally set up, but they do have trade, they do have identity, they do have commerce, they do have land, they do have, in some cases, like the Kuna Indians, the Kuna Indians on the east coast of Panama. They're about 80,000 folks strong, wonderful people, amazing people. If you want, I can pull up some photos of some of them. I'll actually do that on a different, let's see. I won't do it right this second, but it actually really is pretty neat to look at. Let's see if I can find it real fast. This goes back a long time, but see if I can just find them on the fly here. This maybe not, but yeah, here we go. So these are some of them. So these two men here actually represent two of the different tribes. These folks, back in the days when I didn't really understand the UN, these are two gals that were translators, because these Kuna Indians, this was taken in 2000, I want to say 2007. So you know there's some age difference, primarily with Phil. He sure keeps his age young, but this gentleman here and this gentleman here represent those 85 or 80,000 Kuna Indians that are on the east coast of Panama. And they've literally been sovereign. But how have they actually communicated? How have they learned? How have they grown? And in many ways, they've just stayed on their own, and they've stayed happy. And they've stayed separate from a lot of the nonsense that has gone on within society. This particular trip, we were actually rolling out ClearOS server on Dell servers. So they're big servers with a small operating system, and it was connected to cable and wireless. And we actually have some other photos where we were taking it through the jungle and on canoes and on animals. But we actually set it up so some of the medicine men could actually ask some questions and provide answers around health. So it was some pretty neat stuff down in this particular part of the world. So I just thought I'd pull that up, as it's a good reminder as to the work that's gone on for so very long. But again, the technology and enabling decentralized systems to be able to be rolled out into these parts of the world where they have the opportunity to use them. Some of them may not, but some of them may fully fledged say, you know what, instead of using Bitcoin, instead of using different other currencies that are easily centralized. So for instance, there's 4 countries that have actually rolled out Bitcoin as a standard currency within the last 4 or 5 years. And when they figure out that it takes too long to actually roll it out, so it literally takes, when we look at it, I'm going to jump back over here to this Digital World site, and I'm going to do a comparison between the digital world and Bitcoin in particular. So what this chart represents is, over on the left here, you basically have permissioned blockchains. So these are kind of private ones. Then you've got permissionless blockchains, which are public chains. And these chains particularly, I'm going to jump over to another window. Some folks are pinging me here real fast. There we go. So these are permissionless blockchains, which are public. So you basically have a ledger that is transparent, public. It runs multiple nodes to be able to run them. And what you'll see is a comparison between Ripple, Stellar, Solana, Litecoin, Ethereum, Digital World, which is what we're focused on and talking about, Binance, Bitcoin SV, which is Satoshi Vision, as well as Bitcoin. And then you'll see just a general comparison across the boards between all of them, and you can understand the differences. Now I'm going to zoom back out here so you can really see what we're talking about. We're talking about systems that actually have keys, key management, identity management. And when I'm being specific there is, when you have Bitcoin and you tie to the Lightning Network and you attach a Bitcoin public address with a name, a phone number, or an address, you're effectively centralizing decentralized systems when artificial intelligence or machine learning is layered on top of it. So it's really important to understand that if countries are going to adopt these standards as a monetary system or a currency base, they need to know that it'll take an average 10 minutes to do a full transfer and settlement, which is a lot faster than the existing systems. People don't know this, but Visa takes days to do full settlement. Bitcoin can do full settlement within 10 minutes. But what's happened is, in effect, Visa / the Visa Foundation / others have come in to actually fund the Litecoin network to be able to provide that service where someone can actually do a transaction that looks like it's real time, but the full settlement hasn't actually closed. But you can't do it. There's some limitations to it, primarily around the value that can be exchanged. So with that being said, this is a really good tool. This was actually done out of Australia with an organization that's a university that really looked into this independently. And then down here, we do a comparison between banks. So these are normal bank systems, traditional banks, and it shows you the differences between what and how they actually work. Now, the IMF and the World Bank will want to lead most of these different countries that we're talking about within this council. These countries, the IMF wants to actually teach them that there's only one way to do things. And what they call know your customer and anti-money laundering requirements and recommendations as a mandate, they literally are pushing those to centralize any of the different technologies that come out. So that's one of the purposes around this coalition, is to counterbalance not just the UN's efforts, but also to counterbalance what the IMF and others are actually trying to force into certain ecosystems. I'm going to go ahead and take this out of here. Looks like we've got some folks that are coming in late. I don't know if there's other moderators inside of this. Let's see. Can anybody see someone else trying to come in? Oh, here we go. It looks like, Charles, that's you triggering that again. So I'm just going to reject that if that's okay. So the Oceanic Coalition movement is basically broken out of these different ecosystems, which we'll see starting to come up. And here are some early looks into them. For those of you that already know Tuvalu, there's a lot of forward movement that they've been focused on and doing. This is actually something that is not public, has a lot of review that needs to go through, scrutiny, understanding, utilization. The Constitution has actually been announced within the country and changing some of the policies to actually align with the future. It's a wonderful document and the work that's gone in behind it. These are some examples of how systems can actually come together. And when we look at this, there's actually other elements to it as well. So it's not just one, there's multiple that actually bring it together. So we'll go ahead and run back over and then keep scrolling down. But yeah, so you can see basically systems and identity that will actually be kind of the future. So, and it's not just a physical document. And for those that are actually looking right now, you can see me holding up a Tuvalu physical driver's license versus a driver's license that will be using encryption-based technologies like the one on the right here, and then also one that is a soft-based one on the left. So you can actually see how they would look and feel both digitally and physically. These are marking some of the systems that will actually be launched by other countries that are currently in massive flux, such as Ukraine, where everything is going to the same standard, but it's doing it in a centralized way. So that's the biggest difference in what Tuvalu is doing versus what Ukraine is doing, is it will be a decentralized approach. And when I say Tuvalu, they're one of many systems that will actually get deployed, but they're probably one of the most important systems because of where they're physically located and because of how rural they are. They're the least traveled country in the world today, and one of the smallest other than the Vatican as far as country and landmass go. This lagoon is about 10 miles by 12 miles, and the people their hearts are pure, their intentions are pure, their spirits are just amazing. And there's many that actually want to help and add value, but there's a lot of lip service that goes along with it, especially when they talk about, you know, the green initiative and stopping some of the emissions and stopping some of the global warming, which I don't know if you buy into that or not, or stopping some of the water that is rising or not. But the reality is their home, their physical home is in jeopardy. And so this is one way to be able to have an attempt to help them to document not just their lives, but their nationality. And as nationals of Tuvalu, that is not forgotten, and it is always remembered, as well as they can stay connected no matter where they are. Their memories will not be forgotten, and their physical environment that they lived in and grew up in won't be forgotten either. There's also some benefits, not just for some of the vehicles. They have limited vehicles on the islands. They have one runway that's used as a lot of different things, from sleeping all the way to playing games. And just it's an amazing environment, but also one of the core revenue generators is around registering boats, not just vehicles, but boats particularly. They also have a lot of revenue around their .tv domain, so that's paid for a lot of the roads within their main island. We look forward to standing up a dispute resolution system with them and for them for the future, as well as, you know, the different way to be able to resolve some of the existing legal processes that are currently out there. There's a lot to be understood and trained there. These are some of the countries that stand with them, and wonderful countries, very similar hearts, very similar regions. For instance, many go ahead. I look forward to getting our own clear one back. So these are some of the examples of different partners that are in similar circles. For instance, Vanuatu actually has in their constitution currently written in decentralization as a core part of that. So basically what you'll see is within the Vanuatu within the Tuvalu ecosystem, then you'll see one within Aotearoa. And Aotearoa is something that has been a very important core part of the journey. Well over a decade. This is actually started in 2009, and then physically again in 2011, all the way to 2013, had the opportunity to really learn and have eyes opened around the difference between Aotearoa and New Zealand. And so what you'll see is basically Aotearoa standing up separate from New Zealand as a very different ecosystem, but similar things that we talked about within the Tuvalu country, whereas you can actually imagine IDs and memories and systems and currencies that will actually span trading systems and payment systems from one country to another country without having foreign exchange systems in the middle of it that can limit fair market value associated with value exchange. That's one of the ways that, now get this, if you can follow this through, the International Monetary Fund will go to different developing countries and make recommendations around how to actually deploy their systems, how to do banking, how to do X, Y, and Z. And then if they follow those recommendations, knock, knock, knock on wood, then they'll have the ability to get financing from organizations like the World Bank, which in many ways, in many cases, indirectly and directly is funded by the Reserve Bank or the Federal Reserve Bank within the United States of America, which is actually a separate entity not associated with the original United States of America. So there's just understanding different nuances and connections and helping to create a parallel alternative system to what humanity is currently has the opportunity to be involved with, but also has the opportunity to walk away from. We can all choose the systems that we choose to be a part of. We don't have to register a business or a license or anything, a birth certificate, a marriage, a death. We don't have to do certain things that we think we have to do. We can choose systems that can actually afford us the ability to be in control of our own identity and our own future, as well as our own past. And maybe if there's assets that we've garnished over the years, maybe it's land, maybe there's vehicles. By the way, this last week, we were able to wire up the vehicle management system within multiple different databases within Europe, Asia, as well as North America, so Canada and the United States of America. So what this means is two different things. I don't know if you can see here, but there's actually a number. Yeah, I won't be able to zoom in on this particular one, but there's actually a number here that is the last 6 digits of an encryption key that actually goes on to the license plate. And the license plate looks something like this. So imagine a license plate that actually has an encryption key. If you notice the last part of this will actually be these numbers, and then it ties to this particular QR code. So if this is scanned or if these numbers are run, it actually ties to a database that will actually pull up the records about that vehicle. But what's not there is exactly what you'll see in some of these IDs. Do you notice how there's no last name here? To get the last name, there actually has to be an action on, for instance, if an officer were to pull someone over, let's say for speeding, and they were scanned this QR code, it would pull up a system that would say, this is maybe the owners, this is how it's financed, this is if it's stolen or not, this is if it's insured or not. But they could actually see, like for instance, here is a license. So this is a driver's license. And you would actually be able to see the particular name of the individual. And so they could verify a face and a first name, but they don't need to know all the other details. But if they want to know all the other details, let's say they were going 1,000 miles an hour in a 10-mile-an-hour zone. And I'm being facetious with the miles, but let's say they did something really wrong. And actually in this part of the world, they do it by kilometers instead of miles, but which is a whole nother thing. I think there needs to be an agenda item. Well, we'll talk about that later, but the metric system and the miles and all these other things, they need to really be simplified. But what I'm trying to articulate is a request can go from the officer to see the identity, and the individual can actually verify the identity at the same time showing the officer without giving them their cell phone. So what you're seeing is between now and May of 2025, so about 13 months from now, you're going to see the Real ID get very, very real. And what I mean by that is if you've got a gold star on your driver's license, you're in the Real ID club. So now you can go into governmental-based entities within the United States of America and surrounding approved areas. What that means is airports or banks or general areas that you will not be able to actually go into. I didn't believe this personally, so I actually went to the DMV this last week and I actually asked them specifically if that was really true. And they gave me this paper right here, Real ID acknowledgement. So they go through and they actually talk about, for those that don't see this, they go through and they actually talk about where you won't be able to go. So, or where you will be able to go. So it's like, for instance, any of the artifacts within the Hawaiian kingdom. So with the Queen, the literally I can see it just, but the point that I'm trying to drive at is the state is running the archives. People won't be able to go into the archives unless they comply with this. People won't be able to go and get a bank account, which then will tie to the credit system, which then will get them into the system. And whether you're in a 15-minute smart city, which is not a good thing for those that are hearing me, or whether you're just trying to survive within the financial system but still have some level of autonomy and privacy, you'll be forced one way or the other to either get into the system or to get out of the system. That's why this work is so imperative. Literally, we're 13 months away from people not being able to fly, not being able to bank. And the lady at the desk, and I'll pull this up here for you real fast as well. The lady at the desk pulled this piece of paper out, and she said, you need to provide 3 items. So one of these 3 items. And I basically went through it, and it's very overreaching, and it's not like it's these are easy things to actually duplicate and not prove an identity of where someone physically resides, because that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to do it based upon where your actual residence is. But I said, what if someone can't come up with these? And she said, well, that's why people are homeless, because they can't figure out how to come up with these to get an ID to then be banking and then get a job and blah, blah, blah. And so and I said, and you're just comfortable with that. So And she was like, well, I don't make the rules. I just follow the rules. And I asked her, what about the 10 to 14 million people that have walked across the border that actually get an ID, they get a debit card and a bank account tied to that debit card and money, 12 to 1800 US dollars per month on the credit card. This isn't everyone, but a good majority of the latest ones. And then they get, in some cases, housing, medical, as well as food stamps or welfare. And then the food stamps will also tie to this new payment system that we're talking about. And I won't even talk about the details of that. But what I'm trying to help turn on, at least with this gal, was, so you're saying that it's okay for a non-US citizen to just come across the border without a problem, but yet someone, and in the cases that I'm particularly talking about, I go down the streets. I saw crazy homelessness, a massive issue within San Francisco, and we all know why that's the case. But here in the Hawaiian Islands, it's either people have been shipped here from other parts of the ecosystem, or it's gotten so expensive to be able to live because the simplicity and values of their life. They focus on quality of life, family, relationships. They don't go and they don't choose to check in and run the clock to then make the US dollar to then live in society. So they end up on the streets, and then they end up with other ecosystems. It's just, from what I've seen, it's very, very sad. And I believe it's only going to get worse when we talk about people being able to financially make ends meet and physically have shelter or a home. So the importance of identity is massively important when it comes to this. So imagine a case where it was actually brought, that a human rights case was brought and said, this individual was not given these basic human fundamental rights. And what I'm specifically talking about are rights similar to what a driver's license or a permit would actually give you. And if you don't believe me, go look up, the Supreme Court ruled that it is constitutionally protected to be able to have the ability to travel. But what happens if you don't get a driver's license? And that's one of the reasons why I went in to actually understand, what is it to get a driver's license? So this is the actual paperwork to go and get a driver's license, okay? I won't go through it. This is the paperwork to get an identity card. So there are different cards. You have a driver's license, you have an identity card. They basically do the same thing, but one of them will allow you to drive and one of them won't. All of them force you to sign this document that is a designation and acknowledgement for Real ID. So if you don't sign this document around Real ID, which basically, when people understand what the Real ID system is underneath it, it does the same type of thing that you can find here within the digital world and within all of these beautiful little countries now. So when we look at all of these different countries, many folks may say these are just developing parts of the world. They don't understand. But I would argue that when I get to know and understand the intelligence of Polynesians and Micronesians and the folks within the Pacific, they are not stupid. They're actually very brilliant. They understand the importance of simple things in life, whether that's time or family or relationship, or what they would call whakupapa in New Zealand, or Aotearoa, which is where we come from and who we are. They understand simple truths that leapfrog over the luxury of having a Costco. Yes, yeah, very good point. Very good point. And you can interrupt anytime and make points like that. But yes, there's massive validity, and I met with another gentleman, I'll just call him, well, no, I won't even tell you his name, but there are many leaders in this area that will stand up, and we'll observe what's happening within the Lahaina rebuild. We'll observe what's happening with the state, and what's literally 2024, they go and launch eminent domain holdings, create a private company with a private board, and then sprinkle money into it. We'll watch how that actually gets to the individuals, the almost 2,000 homes that were burnt. Because from what I'm seeing and observing currently, there's no material value that the county, the state, or federal, FEMA's done a lot of work. They've spent a lot of money, but I would say that literally maybe 12 to 15% of that value has gotten to the actual individuals that had their homes burnt. I personally see the pain and the strife of providers that add value in society and struggle to move their families every 60 days to another place. In some cases, they feel like they're being taken care of. In other places, the lack of stability is actually the core of the problem. But I don't see any real solutions to actually addressing the issue. And maybe that's by design. Maybe the real design was to just build up the next smart city and to be able to track and profile folks that are willing to comply with Real ID. But the value of what this entity here is, this oceanic coalition and movement, is not just within the Pacific, but it will actually go to all ends of the world. It will have countries like Saudi Arabia that will be deeply involved from the basis of it. It will have counties spanning from literally Oregon into Idaho, into Utah, to Arizona, and down to Texas, that will cut the Pacific into the Gulf of Mexico. Again, oceanic is a very, very key part of this. We're on a wonderful earth. This world that we get to live on, this sphere, this amazing planet, it's connected with water that has land that pops up that we create imaginary borders of. These borders create nationalities, or in some ways, they create the separation of nationalities, and I'll be specific. So imagine a federalist that then ties to a Democrat Party, that then ties to democracy, that then ties to a legal system on one hand. On the other hand, imagine a nationalist, okay, that then ties to a Republican ecosystem, that then ties to a republic, that then ties to law. And when I say law, there are multiple different jurisdictions of laws. Here's an example of the three. There is law of the sea, also known as maritime law. There is law of the land. I won't go into the details of what that is because most of us already struggle through it around civil or criminal law. And then there's law of the air. And that relates to how trust come about. So how businesses and things that can just be created out of nothing that actually operates like an individual. For instance, in the United States of America, you can get financing for certain things if you have a social security number that then ties to a credit report that then validates that you are who you say you are and you actually pay your bills and you have an income stream, a cash flow stream to actually pay it. But what if you create a business out of nothing? This could be an LLC, it could be a C Corp, an S Corp, an LLP, it could be different types of special purpose vehicles. But what you're doing is you're creating an employer identification number that ties to those. Instead of a social security number, they're the same sequence. But then you can actually create what they call a PAYDEX or a rating for that business that then also does the same thing as an individual. That's a good example of the air law or the law of the air, and what we call trust law as well. You'll also see a lot of different decentralized, I shouldn't say that because you probably won't understand it, but imagine Cayman Islands, Panama, Switzerland, or the Cook Islands. Those are the top 4 different countries in the world that actually drive economic value around asset management using trust-based law. So you create a business holding trust, you put a trust that can hold the business, then you put it actually has a bank account in a certain jurisdiction where those are being secured. All we're talking about are instruments, they're legal instruments that people in some ways are lawful instruments. And so you got to understand the difference between legal and lawful. You got to understand the difference between a bar association and people that are, remember how I started this meeting around a private membership association? That's the same thing as that the DMVs operate off of. It's the same thing that the banks operate off of. So it's the same things that the legal system operates off of. You basically go and take a bar test to be in the legal system. Same thing in these other ecosystems, So there's a difference between a bank and a credit union and members of credit union. Have you ever wondered why you don't have to be a member of a bank, but you have to be a member of a credit union? They all tie to the same structure. So I hope this is making sense. One of the other countries that we want to announce is not just, the Kingdom of Hawaii. So this is actually fully blown, fully live. If you don't believe me, go ahead and go to your app store, whether you're on Apple, whether you're on Android, or whether you're running a Clear phone or even a Hawaiian phone, and download Hawaiian Life. So this Hawaiian Life app is fully functional today. You can use the Hawaiian Dala. You can get an identity. You can get for instance, there's an individual here on this call that actually went through an adoption process, actually two of us. You can actually go through an adoption in this ecosystem. You can get married. You can drive. You can have a death certificate. Hopefully it's not needed, but you can actually have a full-blown financial system and identity system and land management system that also builds the businesses and builds the trusts that tie to the individual. And there's a big thing I want to really underscore here, because this came up yesterday. These assets are the individual that created them with the fingerprint that ties to the 12 words that they have, not the system. There's no human that can be in the middle of this. I hope you really understand that. These are using different policies with councils that create a rule that a service provider and ecosystem operate to deliver services around, but it is not owned by anyone but that has that encryption key. That's why this is so important, and the derived keys that tie to it. So maybe if you created a car versus a boat versus a plane versus a scooter, they're all going to have different encryption keys that are derived keys, but off of the main key. So when people start understanding, oh, Bitcoin is one public key, and the digital world is actually multiple derived keys, and it's infinite. It just keeps going. Like there's a gentleman this morning that said, Mike, hey, we think we came up with this technology that'll actually map every human. Well, it's like, great. This technology will map every human and every asset in over generations in perpetuity. So it uses math that is intelligently organized, that puts the simplicity back into the individual's hand. If you don't believe me, go grab the app and literally start using it, start understanding it, start seeing how it can actually maturely help countries, kingdoms, nations, principalities, and tribes, or any kind of people to stand up. Doesn't matter if you're a part of a community, if you're a part of we've seen communities that are standing up and using this stuff. We've seen counties that are saying, you know what, I'm not going to use the county software that's out there. I'm going to do land management and asset management within this. So, and you'll see some big things that are changing there. But one of the ones that hasn't been talked about that we look forward to talking a lot about is actually the Kingdom of Indonesia. Wonderful people, amazing heart. And for those that are not aware, for instance, you can actually go on Google, ClearOS Indonesia. I'm going to mess that up. They have literally written their own manuals, military, it's their banking system. It's used, let me see if I'm going to, here's a Facebook page. I want to try and show you the stuff that they have built, because it is phenomenal. A gentleman named Andy Micro is the one that actually led it, and he's the one that got it into schools, and just amazing things. But yeah, so you can see this is an example of some of their jackets. They literally have shirts. They've got, it's just phenomenal. As a matter, what I'll do is I will just search for images. We'll see what comes up here. So this is some of their training manuals in their language. These are some of their events. This is actually so we're on 7 going to 8, but you can see some of the old user guides. They created 100% of these documents. Absolutely phenomenal. They created this logo. I mean, we didn't do it. They built all of this stuff. Let's see if I can find. It is just massive. Like what they have done. This is some of the older stuff, and it translates. So this is still in English. But the point that I'm driving at is Indonesia is a part of the world that will absolutely appreciate what this is. Why? Because the core of the education, the technology sector, the banking sector, and there was even, they tried to put ClearOS server at the gateway layer, which is where the internet service providers come in for cellular providers. So any of the cell phones that actually go through it, they passed laws to actually try and do this. They also did this in Parliament in 2004 with Australia. So Optus, Telstra, Vodafone, these are all different ISPs that were mandated by Parliament to filter the internet before it became a real problem. And in Indonesia, one of their biggest issues is actually sex trafficking. And they figured out, hey, it's actually because of pornography on the phones. Let's block pornography on the phones, blah, blah, blah. Has it happened? No. But should it happen? Yes. So what you'll start seeing is this same basic framework being stood up. When I say framework, I'm talking about login capabilities for each one of these different jurisdictions where they'll have their own. I'll give you an example. So this is a login jurisdiction within the Hawaiian Kingdom, and you can come in to actually see what kind of business has been registered, all the different businesses, and then you can jump into one of them. So for instance, let's jump into this most recent one. You can see this doesn't have a real good reputation score. You can see it's got a web domain. You can see that it actually has a digital world identity. So notice this is in the Hawaiian Kingdom, but there's a digital world element to it that actually is a third-party validator. So the kingdoms can actually be created within this digital world, and then the jurisdiction for that is governed by the certain physical kingdom and land side of it. So you've got different assets. You've got different, for instance, you can see different members or managers. And as there's more maturity here, for instance, this doesn't have an asset, but it does have a member. You can't see who this member is. But if I requested it, let's see what they've set up. So they've actually set up a birth certificate, marriage certificate, divorce certificate. They have joined no councils, no organizations. So they don't have any businesses or they don't have any assets, but they do have a vehicle registered. And basically, so they did their identity and they have an asset, but we don't know who they are. We can try and request it, and our identity will be pushed to them at requesting time. So hopefully you're understanding some of the maturity that's found in here. What we'll do is we'll go into one of these, maybe this Kona coffee, same thing. So this actually has a higher reputation primarily because it actually has a digital asset that's been created. So when you jump into these digital assets, I wanted to see if there's any owners of it. No, there's no owners. Is someone trying to ask something real fast? Getting some feedback there. Okay. There was one down below it as well. Let's see here. No, that actually had two assets tied to it. Let's see if we can find one that's in here. Yeah. So anyways, I hope you're understanding some of the maturity around what's happened recently and how it's all coming together, primarily around this oceanic coalition. You'll see amazing partners that are going to be a part of this. Some partners that are doing some phenomenal things, such as driving awareness around how things can actually be identified, how an individual can stand up, how certain things. So if you haven't seen this Operation Restoration, you should really take a hard look at this. These are some folks that are actually helping each county by county to understand what the law is and how to hold your local government accountable. Whether people realize it or not, the founding fathers of the United States of America decentralized the authority down to the actual county level, down to, namely, the sheriff within the county. And so the sheriff has more sitting power and acting power than even the president of the United States, no matter how many executive actions they want to take. And so what this is doing is it's actually holding the individual counties accountable if they're doing things that are not appropriate. If you look at some of the counties in Arizona, you'll start seeing this starting to go live. Again, we're in the month of March 2024, and you will start seeing this pepper throughout different counties in the United States of America and in different provinces in both Canada and Australia. So I'll stop blabbing. I hope that this is a good report out for folks that actually care to follow along. We'll go ahead and jump to any kind of questions or thoughts or comments whenever you're ready. I'll stop presenting.
Hi, Michael. I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you say that we can choose which whether we want to be centralized or decentralized. So if I choose that I don't want to be part of the system and I want to be decentralized. So how is that going to work? If I need to go grocery shopping, how am I paying for that? If the government deposits the money, my retirement into my bank account, how can I be decentralized when part of my life is tied to the centralized systems?
Really, really good question. Imagine if you do direct deposit into an account that also gives you like a foreign exchange where you can actually pull it out in a different currency. It's just that simple. So imagine, for instance, we were working with the #1 direct deposits organization that does payroll for people. So they're doing payroll and they're part of the direct deposit. Imagine if overnight it becomes an option to actually get your value that you've created. So you go and work for a day, and let's say that you get $100 for that day in US dollars, and they direct deposit it into your account. Imagine if you can just convert that to a different asset and then use that asset. So a good example is right now, I can use a physical wallet with a physical card, but when I'm in the digital side of this, I actually don't have a taxation. When I'm in the physical side of it and in US dollars, that's a possible taxable event as far as income taxes go. For those of you that have researched income taxes and understand the history and viability, and this isn't a tax conversation. You can go do your own studying on that. But what this is a simple transaction from the fiat US system to a digital non-US system. And that's
so I want to do that now. So how do I do it? I want to take my money out of my bank account and go into the digital world. How do I do that?
So right now, I'm going to share my screen again. Right now, we're actually working with an organization. I won't be specific on the name.
I'm in Canada, remember that.
So imagine where you could actually come into a jurisdiction like the Hawaiian Kingdom, and you could actually say, you know what? I believe that the kingdom was actually taken over, and I believe in the Hawaiian dala. So this is a dala, not a dollar, not a US dollar or American dollar. It is a dala. Believe it or not, the Hawaiians, they actually had their own dala before the US brought in and forced the dollar on them. And when you want to go in and control a country, you control their currency and their ability to do commerce and transact. And then that's basically what has happened. So what's happening within the digital world, enabling the Hawaiian Kingdom, is the ability for them to actually stand up on their own. Like literally, they can transact. So here's the answer to your question. Let's say that someone would come in and they get dala. So for instance, there are lots of little stores around. Let's say that in the Hawaiian Islands, there's one main store that goes throughout all of it, and they're on every corner, and you can actually go in and you can load up your phone or a card with a dala. Now, I'm not directly answering your question, but when you actually do that, then you can transact and buy something. And certain things can actually happen within that ecosystem around awareness, adoption, administration. But if we were doing it like we were doing it within the Fijian ecosystem, the Reserve Bank of Fiji had actually authorized, they know that the digital systems are coming. They also know that there's one bank that actually does majority of the mortgages. They also look at authorizing digital mortgages. When they authorize digital mortgages, the folks within the Reserve Bank were saying, well, how do people actually get paid? And this is the answer to your question. Imagine if you had the choice to then drop that money into an asset. And I haven't talked a lot about this historically, but I'm pulling up clearassets.org, which is actually a digital organization as well as a physical organization based out of Fiji. And it does exactly what you're talking about, where you can convert crypto-based or physical-based assets or fiat-based assets into digital-based assets. And imagine if you could actually do that. The key is today the jurisdictions within a foreign exchange hop from where you are up in the Canadian dollar. But in all reality, it's all going to basically mesh together. If people understood where this technology, and I'll pull this chart back up again. So if people really just looked at a couple different things, if you looked at Ripple, if you looked at Stellar, and you looked at the digital world, these technologies will actually all interface with one another and actually stream together. So for cross-border transactions, Ripple is trying to position within that ecosystem. For real-time transactions, Stellar is trying to do that same thing. But when you dig into what they're actually doing, they're doing it within a compliance ecosystem within the United States, going through the SEC process and patting that on the back, paying no attention. Actually, I shouldn't say it that way because they do a lot with other countries on the foreign exchange side of it. But they're not enabling the other countries to actually stand up on their own ecosystems. And that's where the digital world comes in a truly decentralized approach and process. So going back to your question, because it's a massively valuable question. Today, you cannot go and say, I want to direct deposit my employer's check into this account unless that employer is willing to. So in some employers say, and I don't know specifically how it works within, I think it's IRD. Is the IRD in New Zealand and the IRS is in the US and Canadian, you have a taxing authority.
The CRA.
CRA. Okay, so CRA, IRD, IRS, these are all different taxing authorities and bodies that in some cases, some people argue or disagree, they're a form of slavery, control.
100%.
Okay, so that's not what this is about, but people can, do what they want to do as far as understanding freedoms or not. So when you go and work with someone, for them to get certain tax breaks or different programs and eligibility, the federal government, wherever you are, and I'll use these same, whether it's the IRS, IRD, or the CRA. Is that right? CRA? Canadian?
Yep, Canada Revenue Service.
Revenue Services.
Canada Revenue Agency, sorry.
Okay. So when you actually go and create a business to create jobs, you have to get a number, like in the United States of America, it's a federal employer identification number issued by the Internal Revenue Service. That number then authorizes you to go get a bank account. Now, it doesn't say that you have to pay everyone through the bank account, but it does say if you want to actually be eligible for certain programs, for instance, in the United States of America, they had this thing called a pandemic. And everyone basically stopped paying and started shutting businesses down. And the government told people they couldn't work and they couldn't go to work. And the employers had to shut things down. And then people got to go and get injected for whatever reason. And a whole nother conversation there. It was supposed to help them. But that's not what this conversation's about. What it's about is after the employers could then open their doors back up, the governments measured their progress or lack thereof based upon how many employees they had. They could then get certain credits. And there's different types of programs for these credits. You could get credits based upon the amount of employees divided by a certain pay. And you could get certain credits that were going to be repayable and certain credits that were not going to be repayable. And then after they got rid of certain funding, they started another round of it. But if you complied by their rules and regulations, which basically meant you were paying people through a certain process. And that's why your question is so valuable. Paying people through a certain process that basically forces US dollar adherence is why you were eligible for these programs. But if you change the US dollar, like you're in Canada, I guarantee, does the same type of thing.
We did. Absolutely.
Right?
That's exactly what they did.
And maybe it's a part of a bigger plan. Maybe
Of
the
course
folks.
it is.
Yeah. I mean,
So-
I actually went to the World Economic Forum in Davos the year before they played this COVID thing out. And I'm telling you, it is absolutely a scripted plan by design. And it's all about forcing people into their ecosystem, their licensing, their currency, their registration, their identity, their systems, because they think that they're the only ones that can actually build buildings or that can produce food or that have the secret combination of a certain type of vaccine that's going to be the holy grail to all of our lives. But it's not
All
true.
of their lives, not our lives, Michael.
It's right.
All
It's
about them.
Right. You're spot on. It's not truth. That is
It's
not truth.
True at all. So I want to get out of this system. Where do I have to move? What do I have to do? I want out. I don't want to be part of the system, any of them.
Can I ask a question regarding that?
Please, Raymond, especially if you've got a nice answer for Daniela.
I don't. In fact, I'm a little confused. I can tell that you very much understand the difference between the legal system in the world, which I believe all goes back to the bar at the, what is it called, the Crown or something like that in the city of London.
Yep.
And the law, the only law is common law. Is that right?
Well, the only law is actually the
Think
law.
about these other legal systems as if they were laws or legal. Go ahead.
What is the difference between reality and perception and adoption? We all kind of live in the same reality where the sun comes up every day and it goes down every day. The weather changes, the water rises and it goes down. The heat comes, the cold comes, the seasons come or they don't. There's certain realities, life and death, breath and beats, but we may perceive them very differently, right? We may perceive life very differently. Some people may be,
Sure.
I am so tired of this nightmare. I don't want to deal with this anymore, versus the lady I talked to this morning around rolling out like 70 clear homes in Maui. And she's like, I don't even watch that stuff. I don't pay attention to it. I don't buy into it. I just grow food and I just live my life. Her perception is different, even though we all live in the same reality. And adoption is another side of it. Like there's another gentleman I talked to this morning, which was like, you know, Mike, back in the days when a doctor needed to help XYZ person and they had $250, they would give it. But if ABC person only had 40 bushels of bananas, they would give it. So the adoption side of it is where we have the choice. And we've talked about this before. And I'm going to pull up a new site. This is Hawaiian, but not life, it's shopping. And there's two parts to this. I won't dig into all the details. I can tell you that some of these people are amazing and they're making a real difference. But the real topic, especially around this brilliant man, comes down to doing two things: committing to buy local and committing to use the local currency. If we choose to do those two things, the adoption will actually follow. So just think about that. If what's happening in society is farmers are upset because global warming has changed their whole reality, which is just like what happened with the pandemic. You know, oh no, you can't farm, burn it, kill it, toll it over. Oh, we don't have food, right? So there's an issue. You have centralized supply chain that we all basically now have to live off of. And so food becomes the next issue. A lot of us will push back if it's an injection into our arm. I'm amazed at how many people didn't push back, but a lot of us just complied and said that's what it is. But what happens when it's not an injection in our arm, but it's actually our stomachs hurt? Because it's natural to be hungry when you haven't eaten what the world says is 3 meals a day.
We need water even more than food, though.
Yeah, agree. Water is very
Water
important.
polluted. Drinking local water doesn't help much.
Whether it's water, whether it's food, whether it's air. Those are three basic things that we've been given, whether you want to talk about Aqua or God or Heavenly Father or Heavenly Mother or just some creator, or we're just floating around on this earth. Water, food, and air are basic gifts. The ability to travel and collect them is another. The ability to actually transact is something that is overlooked and something that is very ignored and important. the ability for us to come together within different regions and do those same types of things free and sovereign as individuals is massively important. From the sweat of our brows, we will basically find joy and we'll find health and vitality. Go ahead.
I agree with all of that, but I'm trying to come back to Danielle's wanting to know where she can go. The impression, I don't know whether you learned all this legal stuff 100% entirely on your own, or whether you studied it under someone like David Straight and learned it, indirectly through your own effort, of course. But the two things that are on my mind here is individual sovereignty. That would be what I think Danielle is talking about, opting out of the whole damn system altogether, totally, which is what David Straight is teaching, I think. And the other thing is, it doesn't matter how sovereign you you are, if, I'll just call it the matrix, is screwing up your air and your water and your land.
So remember that we've got to live in the world, but not be of the world, and that perception is reality, and what we adopt can actually become reality. It goes back to, and here's the core of the answer, what this oceanic coalition and these different countries and kingdoms that are adopting these different systems and way of life, they can actually create an alternative choice for people. I mean, how many people would actually want to go live in Tuvalu and just live from the sea? Even though this is being threatened, you could actually be a part of a society that doesn't care about money. They're happy.
And Tuvalu and the rest of the Oceanic islands accommodate, say, 4 billion people?
No, we have to do it in our own backyards. We have to grow food locally. We have to use a currency that's local. We have to buy local. That's it. Well,
I've tried what's called a freedom cell, and that's our goal, our idea.
Yep, you got it. So you got it. So
they're the people I was trying to promote the idea of the Clear Fund to.
Yeah, so you're hitting it right on the head. But you're spot on, Robert. So I would say you can actually make a difference. Danielle can make a difference. If you talk to people, you tell people, you know what? There's another way to this. You can actually spend this kind of currency. You can actually grow things that are local to us. Does it mean we have to figure out how to grow stuff? Does it mean we have to figure out where land is that we can grow on? I mean, put it this way. I'm on an island. This particular island imports 90% of its food and spends $3 billion a year, US dollars, to feed them and their visitors. Whereas back up just 200 years ago, they were 100% self-sufficient, right? We're talking about these global elites, crazy ideas around killing people and genocide and control and population density. Well, we're all here as one world and one people to love one another and care for one another, period. If someone is born with a handicap or missing leg, do we kill them? If they're born with an identity question, do we kill them? No. We love. We understand the issue. We love, we serve, we give. We don't throw them away. We look at our brothers and sisters as though they're our family, because we are all one family. And so the
for president.
What? No. That's a part of the problem. I mean, I was joking. But I've had many people say you should run for office. You should do this politics. Blah blah blah. I had somebody pull up a picture with me and Trump this last week twice, and it's like, no, that's not. I don't play the political game. I know that technology is what can actually free us. It's not some president or prime minister or some mayor or some governor. We're one world, one people. Raymond, your vote is the same as Danielle. My vote is the same as Danielle. We're all equal. that we may see things differently. Some of the even more twisted stuff that's going on lately is they're literally pulling in the conscience of the individual and putting it into a computer ecosystem to understand what we would think and what we would do. Now, is this real? Yes. Look at what Neuralink's doing. Look at what and do we have to be scared of it? I believe it's like everything else. There's light and dark. The technology behind it, some of you have actually met some of the people that developed some of this core technology. Not Neuralink, but the parallel to Neuralink that doesn't invasively go into your body, but can actually read yes or no questions of things that you may be asking or trying to communicate. Some of you have seen biofeedback machines. Some of you have seen lie detectors. It uses the same process, but it uses machine learning and artificial intelligence to ask questions through a yes or no question. I'll pull up an example. So this device here is the future of communicating with your body. And it may just look like a little circle that's very unique and different than anything you've ever seen. There's little bumpers on it that hold it in place. And this will be the future of health. People will call it the future of health. In many ways, it will actually read you like you've never been read before, not just sleep patterns.
Are you sharing your screen, Michael? Because we can't see anything.
Yeah, I'm sharing it with the rest of the world. I'll go ahead and come back over to you guys. So here, I'll jump back up. So this is basically what it looks like. So it's a ring that is very advanced. And this is not just, when I say very advanced, this is unlike anything you've ever seen. It's currently going through FDA approval as a medical device to actually communicate with the human body, not through yes or no questions, but what they talk about, kind of like just another ring that will analyze your heartbeat. You know, it'll analyze the way that you actually breathe, your respiration, the types of things that are going on. And notice this clinical stuff that's going on here. But it's much more than the simple stuff of respiration or oxygen levels or sleeping patterns or stress or activity or how you move around, whether it's through tremors or seizures or, you know, it will literally have the ability to communicate through yes or no questions. And I'm, for those of you that have been following us for a very long time, we talked about this 4, 5, 6 years ago. It's real now. This particular device has $50 million into it and has pending FDA, CE, as well as HIPAA compliant, blah, blah, blah. We all know that HIPAA compliant is actually not Health Information and Portability and Privacy Act, but the individuals that own the centralized systems, whether it's on the insurance or the payments or the pharmaceutical sides, can actually control. And the reason I can sit here and say this is before we built decentralized systems, we built centralized systems for those same organizations. Large pharmaceutical companies, large insurance companies, and large payer and providers, including states, funded a lot of the work that we did, only to find out that when we really put solutions to it, they actually didn't want to solve the data problem. Where there's mystery, there's margin. So what if you saw a future where you could have different countries and kingdoms and nations that actually had their own currencies? They had their own identity systems. They had their own financial systems. And literally, they could actually make their own choices. But the mystery and the margin was gone. And the insurance companies and the banks could actually layer into these ecosystems. What would it look like? What would it look like if someone actually had not just a driver's license? Here, I'll jump back over to, they didn't just register an asset or they didn't just have a driver's license, but this actually tied to a digital identity and reputation for their assets. How are their assets operating? How are they maintained? How are they moving? How fast do they move? How far do they move? What trajectories do they move in? How fast do they accelerate? How fast do they stop? How often? These are just heuristics and data sets that insurance companies can run facts off of. But what if the individual could actually own the video feeds and the data feeds and the data that came off of them, and actually enabled insurance companies to give them a much better rate based upon a jurisdiction that didn't have the compliance issues, the regulation issues? So imagine if an insurance company or a bank of the future could actually register within a kingdom, and the kingdom said, you don't have all of this tape to jump through. You don't have all this compliance to jump through, but you do need to do certain things. You do need to be transparent. You do need to show who the owners are. You do need to understand. Let's try and find one that actually has some depth to it. I'll give you an example around an NFL. So let's say that the NFL, okay, notice how this has a higher reputation. So this NFL has different assets, maybe it's teams. And then inside of the teams, you can also see that there are different individuals or organizations that hold different things. So for instance, one of the big things that are currently being targeted, primarily from some of the centralized systems, are the NFL. The owners, the holders of the NFL, they're going after them in a big way. But what if in a digital world, under a kingdom or a country or a nation, etc., you could actually have transparency around the actual organization as well as around the individuals that are behind it? So in this particular case, you can see a particular individual, you can see a name. Many folks can make this out, but there's also many folks that have to actually request to understand who this is. So the direct answer to your question is, we're in the process of seeing a massive change in our dispensation. You are a core part of this. You show up every week to understand what's new, how's it changing, and you actually open your mouths, you open your wallets, you open your... Go ahead. Charles?
Oh, no, I was waiting for you to finish what you were saying.
No, go ahead.
But
you're okay. Go ahead.
okay, so in all this conversation, so you talk about insurances and so on and so forth, whether it be medical insurance, life insurance, car insurance, whatever. All insurance is the theory of large numbers, so spreading the risk off of large numbers. So if my health insurance or my life insurance or my auto insurance, if I'm healthy, responsible, so on and so forth, ideally what you're saying is that the cost of insurance will be going down. However, and how do you cover for the guy that says, you know what, I'm going to eat McDonald's every day and a pint of Haagen-Dazs every day, and I'm going to get up to about 600 pounds, and that's stupid. But so in the current systems of insurance, I have to pay for that person that is going to eat like that in today's current systems of life insurance and health insurance. How's that going to affect in the decentralized? Because if you're going to be decentralized, that I'm not responsible for that person's craziness.
You're spot on.
Is that correct?
Yeah, you're spot on. So imagine in an ecosystem, for instance, I looked at my sleep patterns last night. You know, I've been standing and sitting for too long doing certain things. I work literally 18, 20 hours a day, and my lower back is hurt. It hurts. And so I was tracking sleeping patterns and other things. And we can also track what we eat, what we do, where we go, how much we move. But that's not the answer to your insurance question. This gentleman here actually has a brilliant, and we'll actually have him on maybe the next, as a matter of fact, maybe what we do, I don't know how long this
American
is.
Shopping Party mission: know your superpower.
Actually,
chapter 1.
Yeah, this man, I love his heart, I love his drive, I love his passion. And if you listen to his words, and if you notice the screen behind him, very important. But what we'll do is we'll wrap this meeting up with his response, and then we'll have him come on and actually answer the healthcare question, because he actually has focused particularly on this healthcare question in a very big way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play this out. It's almost 4 minutes, but definitely worth your time. And then we'll wrap this meeting up because we're over time. And then we'll have him come on maybe next week and go over that particular question, because I think it's a very important question to focus on. The net that I would carve out is you're talking about health insurance. Earlier, I was talking about automobile insurance. And you can even do things around home insurance. You could do things around title insurance. And the title insurance game is totally going to change. The real estate game is totally going to change with land management. That's one system. And you're already seeing it with platforms like Zillow and Redfin and others. But imagine them where people can actually do things in a decentralized way. Because right now, people don't understand the data that they're giving away just by providing an application, your social security numbers, and then you're looking at the houses. And when you really dig into Zillow and Redfin and these others, you got the big folks behind it. It's the BlackRocks. It's the centralized housing systems. That's why a certain Klaus Schwab can say, you're not going to own anything and you're going to enjoy it. You're going to love it. But what we're building is the opposite, where people have ownership and they actually benefit from it because they can control their identity and their assets. What this gentleman talks about, the simple summary, is two things: buy local, use a local currency. But I'll let you go through. I think he's an absolute genius. I love his heart. I love his desire. I love his drive. And what I didn't understand was when this gentleman was actually reading this, him and I had actually talked to his mom just the day prior, but his mother, who he had been caring for a very long time, passed away just within the hour prior to this. He was able to stay collective and deliver this message. And then at the end of it, he relayed to us that she had passed. And I just couldn't stop from wailing and just holding him. But it was just watch this because it's very important. Here we go. Any other comments before we play this and wrap up today?
I have a question.
As long as it's related to this, any other folks have a question?
Do it after.
Well, no, I just want to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to ask questions that showed up today. So we'll just provide 3. Go ahead, Raymond. What was your question, bud?
Well, just as Danielle was trying to get you connected with Foster Gamble in hopes that he could help promote this system, integrate it in his work and yours, I'm wondering how familiar you are with Robert Edward Grant.
I'm not.
He's an American polymath who started out as a pharmaceutical CEO, has grown more and more spiritual as he's continued growing through life. He's 54 now and been working. His issues at the highest level are about the same as yours, apart from spirituality. He's decoding the Giza Plateau pyramids, figuring out the math and the symbolism of all the spirituality that's built into that, and many, many more things. He's friends with Alan Green, who's decoded all of the spiritual codes in all of Shakespeare's work. And this guy's plugged into the top people in the world.
Would you get us all connected, Raymond?
I don't think he knows who the hell I am or could care less.
Well, we'll follow your lead if you believe you can do it. I believe you can do it.
His website is robertedwardgrant.com.
Why don't
That's
you,
all.
okay.
I mean, he's doing podcasts these days.
Danielle, thank you for you're just a doer. I love it. We can do this. You guys can do this. So I'm going to go ahead and play this and we'll wrap up here. Here we go. Much love, everyone.
You decide. American Shopping Party mission: know your superpower. Chapter 1: you decide the fate of nations. The American Shopping Party has a simple mission. Number 1, help consumers see
Michael, nothing's
how
playing.
hold
We're showing.
they spend. Number 2.
Thanks for the heads up. I'm going to go ahead and play it in a system. So what we're going to show you here is This is actually Clear Web that I'm going to play it on because the other systems stop it from streaming. You're the only ones that can't see it, but let's see if I can. Okay, here we go.
American Shopping Party, mission, know your superpower. Chapter 1, you decide the fate of nations. The American Shopping Party has a simple mission. Number 1, help consumers see the power they hold in every dollar they spend. Number 2, how they can use that power to ever greater effect. Billions thrive or die by the dollar you spend. And that's true of your life too. You decide your community, your small business and neighborhood, the taxes for your school, those of your town, and your own job as well. It's all right there in every dollar you spend. Are you spending it locally or for those of China, better known as big box retail stores? We've all heard this before when we say every dollar.
I'm not getting any sound.
What better example than the all-powerful China, unstoppable with some saying, Z looks ready to replace America,
Watch it online.
if not actually crush us soon. Just look what they have fueling their rise to global supremacy. China boasts a $15 trillion economy, the world's second largest, growing 5% on a slow year. Cheap oil from Russia means Europe manufacturing has become too expensive to compete with China-made. The Russian economy is booming just as Europe and America are facing economic slowdowns. Saudi Arabia just signed with China as a snub to Biden. The pillar of our U.S. petrodollar now siding with China. Iran and other Middle East nations are also lining up oil deals with China.
There's supposed to be
Rich
sound,
nations
Michael?
are joined by dozens
there
of other
is.
countries
Everyone
looking
can
to
hear you.
replace the petrodollar. Is this the end of the U.S. dollar? China looks ever more serious about invading Taiwan. Its military grows ever larger and more dangerous by the day. America's already struggling in Ukraine against Putin's invasion, and now in the Middle East. The U.S. can't afford another war with China. China is buying off or scaring nations into joining their economic and political orbit. The stories grow of China bribes of our own leader, those throughout the political system and institutions of every kind, right here at home and for those abroad. We have heard the stories. It all sounds so scary. Scary indeed, but there is another force in the world that is even more powerful still. It's your superpower as the American shopper. You have the power to change the world at will. Imagine we just stop buying China-made. We get our Euro brethren to join us. Give it 3 to 5 months. China's mighty economy will take a massive hit. President Xi may even see the collapse of China. Oh, no matter how low the price of goods, no matter how great their oil deal with Saudi Arabia nor Iran's and the other Gulf states, no matter how big and bad that China military, no matter how many U.S. politicians they bribe, the Saudi prince will suddenly see the wisdom of partnering with America once again. And that whole booming Russian economy, Russia will falter too. President Putin just beat the military might of those of Europe and the USA. Russia beat the bankers and their financial SWIFT system. Putin is doing just fine without international investors and winning the war in Ukraine. Sounds incredible, but we all know Russia's economic miracle stopped the end of China's exports to America. Xi knows it. Putin's economic and military miracles are a lot like those of China's. All of them live and die by the whims and choices of the American shopper. That's you. You decide the fate of nations. This will be done without dropping a single bomb, no protest marches, no talking to power, no media headlines, no asking politicians for action. You simply don't buy China-made, and magically, all these history-making changes happen around the world. So when we say billions thrive or die by the dollar you spend, this is so true for America too. Consumption is 70% of the entire U.S. economy. That means you decide who gets paid 70% of the time. The government, the military, the media, Wall Street, politicians, bankers, multinationals, all of them play second fiddle to you, the American shopper. That is the American system today. It all starts with you. Discover your power to change the world with every dollar you spend. Welcome to the American Shopping Party.
So wonderful man. I hope that you get the opportunity to be able to see him. And we'll convene today. So thank you for your time and your attention.